So chapter 4 is basically transcendental knowledge. It's talking about spiritual knowledge, and now we are going to be discussing the little bit of a karma yoga section, and then we will be looking at sacrifices in different the different ways sacrifices are performed. Is this slide visible? Okay, I think we have gone live now. Okay. So, paying my respectful obeisances to the beautiful Sri Sri Radha Govinda temple, the deities. Paying my respectful obeisances to His Divine Grace A.C. Bhakti Vedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada and his disciple Jayapataka Swami Guru Maharaj and temple president His Grace Namnishtha Das Prabhu, and also my guru, my Shiksha Guru Aishwarya Mataji, due to whose grace I am able to discuss chapter 4 today. Now, Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Preshthaya Bhutale Srimati Bhakti Vedanta Swamin Iti Namane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharne Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Pashyatya Desha Tarane Om Ajnana Timran Jasa Jnana Jana Shalakya Chakshurunmila Mena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha श्री चैतन्य मनोभीष्टं स्थापितं येन भूतले स्वयं रूपः कदा मह्यं ददाति स्वपदान्तिकं वन्देऽहं श्रीगुरु श्रीयुतपदकमलं श्रीगुरुं वैष्णवं च श्रीरूपं सागरजातं सहगण रघुनाथान्वितं तं सजीवं साधवैतं सावधूतं परिजनसहितं कृष्ण चैतन्य देवं श्री राधा कृष्ण पादन सह गण ललिता श्री विशाखान्वितं च हे कृष्णा करुणा सिंधु दीनबंधु जगतपते गोपेश गोपिका कांते राधा कांते नमोस्तुते तप्तकांचन गौरंगी राधे वृंदावनेश्वरी वृषभानुसुते देवी प्रणमामि हरिप्रिये पांचाकल्पतरुभ्यश्च कृपा सिंधुभ्य एव च पतितानां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः श्री जय कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौर भक्त वृंद हरे कृष्णा कृष्ण कृष्णा हरे 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 रामा राम राम हरे हरे. So we were in the section. We are actually somewhere in the middle of we are towards the end of the third section today. That is on karma yoga. Like I was saying, karmanyo karmano hi api bodhavyam. Understand the difference between action, inaction, and unauthorized action. So we were looking at the different types of karma, and we are just completing that last part. We're going to be doing 4.23 and 24, and then we have the different sacrifices and a summary. That's it. So today we will just wind up the chapter 4. Whatever time it takes, we'll just wind it up and we'll proceed. So the verse 4.23 and 24, I think we had started discussing. I would just like to recite it once. 4.23 and 24. So 4.23 says that गत संगस्य मुक्तस्य ज्ञानवस्थितचेतसः यज्ञाय चरतः कर्म समग्रं प्रविलीयते. And 4.24 says ब्रह्मार्पणं ब्रह्म हविर् ब्रह्माग्नौ ब्रह्मणाहुतं ब्रह्मैव तेन गन्तव्यं ब्रह्म कर्म समाधिना. So the basic idea is that the work of a man who is unattached to the modes of material nature and who is fully situated in transcendental knowledge merges entirely into transcendence. Whereas in the next verse, Krishna says, a person who is fully absorbed is the same actually. A person who is unattached to the modes, he is fully absorbed in Krishna consciousness. He is sure to attain the spiritual kingdom because of his full contribution to spiritual activities in which the consummation is absolute and that which is offered is of the same spiritual nature. So a person who is unattached to the modes and is situated in transcendental knowledge merges into transcendence, and a person who is Krishna conscious is sure to attain the spiritual kingdom because his contribution is totally in spiritual activities and is fully consumed in the absolute. So we were just going through this yesterday. Such a person is called Krishna conscious. He is free from all dualities, all contaminations, and he knows his constitutional relationship with Krishna. His mind is undeviated from Krishna, and whatever he does it for Krishna. That is akarma, and his work technically becomes, anything he does becomes sacrifice. So we'll look at some sacrifice verses soon, and the resultant actions to all such work is that he will merge into the transcendence liberation, where he actually, that basically the merging here means that he becomes free from his body and he becomes free from his from his both subtle and his gross bodies. So that is the idea. A conditioned soul entangled in material contamination can get out of the material atmosphere only through Krishna consciousness. There is actually no other way. A patient suffering from overindulgence in milk products can be milk products is cured by another milk product, namely curds. So Brahma means spiritual. Brahma Jyoti is Lord's effulgence. When Jyoti is covered by Maya or sense gratification, it is material, and the material veil can be removed only by Krishna consciousness. The mind is absorbed in Krishna consciousness. It is said to be in samadhi. So these are some terms, and anything that is done in such a trance is yajna, and such a sacrifice is absolute. So these are some very common examples that we must have discussed in level 1 also. So just to refresh, so it's like a cashier. A cashier is sitting, and he's receiving all the money, but there's no point where he ever thinks that this money is mine. He's in perfect knowledge that it is not his own money. It is the money which belongs to the whatever, the company or supermarket, or the bank or whatever. He's only doing transactions on behalf of the bank. And the moment he steals even a little bit, he's arrested. He's eligible to be arrested if he's caught on camera. So he knows very clearly that nothing belongs to him. The money that he's dealing with doesn't belong to him. Similarly, a soldier, he'll be killing people in the army. But then for killing, he's awarded Paramveer Chakra. Where same person, if he kills his neighbor, he gets arrested. Again, Arjuna, when he fights for Dharma Yuddha on behalf of God, there is no more karma attached to it. Duryodhana, however, is fighting for his own selfish plan. So he has the karma attached to. He is doing for his selfish plan, his own, motives. So unwinding and winding spool of a tape recorder is another example which is provided, which shows that when you work with for your own account, you have to face the consequences, whereas if you work on Krishna's account, then it is akarma. So just the final part we were looking at of the karma part of this chapter, which was just giving a brief once more a revision of karma, vikarma and akarma. So now let's look at this very nice section, which is sacrifices lead to transcendental knowledge. Fruits of all kinds of Vedic sacrifices is transcendental. So when you're doing some sacrifice which is without any selfish desire, that becomes basically nishkam karma. And when you're doing some Vedic sacrifices, and the fruits that you get is transcendental knowledge. Why? Because it leads to your it leads to your path towards Krishna consciousness. It leads to liberation, and ultimately it will lead to pure devotional service. So that is the reason. Let's look at it. So there will be a variety. We're going to just go through so many different kinds of sacrifices which lead to transcendental knowledge. Let's look at the basic summaries. For example, we are going to be talking in 4.25 about demigod worship and sacrifices unto Brahman. And then we're going to look at the hearing process and senses, how you're going to sacrifice your hearing process and your senses in the fire of mental control. And this is done by unadulterated brahmachari. So we will see that in 4.26, and we're going to understand how the objects of senses are sacrificed or put into the fire of the senses. This is done by the regulated grahasthas. Ashtanga Yoga, where we have the Patanjali yoga system, will be briefly touched upon before we do it in more detail in chapter 6 in 4.27. And that is basically Ashtanga Yoga is basically offering of the function of all senses. Ashtanga Yoga involves a person to have complete control over his senses. So what is the person doing? He is offering in sacrifice the function of his senses and also of the life breath as oblations into the fire of the controlled mind. So you can see repeatedly everywhere that where is the sacrifice being offered? In the fire of a controlled mind, in the fire of mental control, in the fire of your senses. And the goal is to merge into the existence of the absolute. In Ashtanga Yoga, when you're doing Ashtanga Yoga, the primary goal is to merge into the effulgence of the Lord. And charity, the sixth is charity is also a form of sacrifice. That is called Dravyamaya Yagya. So anything which you're giving to somebody in terms of money or in terms of some things, those are all coming under a yagya. So charity, when you give money or anything for the benefit of, you pay the fees of some poor person. So all those are also forms of yagyas. They're also forms of charity. But if you're doing the difference where karma and vikarma and akarma is when you're doing it for the sake of gaining some of your personal, benefit, then it becomes into karma, where you have to come back to get the positive, to enjoy the results of the pious deeds that you have been doing. If you do it in Krishna consciousness, that is when it becomes yagya. It's only anything becomes yagya only when it is done in Krishna consciousness. So yoga yagya is when somebody is sacrificing for a certain perfection in the material world. For example, in Patanjali system, the idea is for merging into existence into the absolute. In Hatha yoga and Ashtanga yoga, there are certain perfections that they aim to get. In holy pilgrimage also there are certain kind of perfections that they are trying to get. So study of scriptures, these are called yoga yagya. Study of scriptures is swadhyaya yagya. Now what we're doing is swadhyaya yagya. We are trying to understand the Upanishads, the conclusion of the Upanishads in the Bhagavad Gita, the Vedanta Sutra, Sankhya philosophy. Any of these, if you are studying, it comes under the study of scriptures as a sacrifice. So we are sacrificing our time, we are sacrificing our energy. So we are putting in so much of effort, and all that is considered as a yagya. Then there is also Hatha Yoga and Pranayama. We'll be discussing 4.29. So coming to 4.25, which are the different sacrifices leading to the transcendental knowledge. Let's right. So 25 says, Devameva pare yajnam yoginah paryupasate brahmagnava pare yajnam yajnenaivopajuhvati. Some yogis perfectly worship the demigods by offering different sacrifices to them, and some offer sacrifices in the fire of the Supreme Brahman. So, what we are looking here is, let's just understand about the four divisions of the human society once more according to the Vedic literature. So, there is, it begins with, for example, the Brahmacharya ashram, the Grihastha ashram, then the Vanaprastha ashram, and the Sannyas ashram. So, Brahmacharya is basically like the student life. So, when you're in the student life, they are also, already meant for sacrifice. So person who is in the student life, they are sacrificing a lot of things. In the olden days, they go to the forests, they have to serve the gurus, they cannot enjoy the food that they want, or they can't just go after any kind of sense gratification. And a brahmachari is expected to in fact go to every householder in those days and beg. There was no system of schooling during the Vedic system was followed, and he was not accepted is not the guru would not accept any payment, so he would only accept service. So the brahmanas were also forbidden to accept any kind of money. They were not allowed to accept that. And so that is a brahmacharya. Similarly, when you come to family life, what is a yagya there? In the family life, a yagya is dana. It's called a dana yagya, like we had seen. So the grihasthas, those who are living in family life with wife and children, they are expected to do some charity, which now we are not aware because we're not taught about all these. For example, suppose you're earning say $1,000, it is expected that you're giving, if not 50, at least 25% of, or some kind of percentage that you're able to afford. You're supposed to do yajna dana yajna. That is also considered to be a part of the of being in the grihasthashram. If you're grihameni, that means you're only enjoying your sense gratification. But when you're doing it as an ashram, the married life is an ashram, that's when you have to follow these principles. So there are four classes, like I said. In every ashrama, it's actually meant to be a part of your spiritual enhancement. So the idea of human life being having a goal of spiritual enhancement or spiritual growth is very much prevalent in this entire system of the Gita. There's a very important verse in the Bhagavad Gita, which is 7.5.31, which goes like this. नाते विदुस्वार्थगतिं हि विष्णुं दुरासयः हि बहिरर्थमानिनः अन्धा यथान्धैरुपनीयमानास् तेऽपि तन्त्र्याम् उरुदां निबद्धाः. So So here it says in this Srimad Bhagavatam verse, it says that people who are strongly entrapped by the consciousness of enjoying material life and who have therefore accepted as their leader a guru who is also similarly blind and he is attached to external sense objects, he cannot understand that the goal of life is to return back to Krishna. Such a person can't understand, and so he engages in the service of, and he can't understand that his goal is to engage himself in the service of Lord Vishnu. So, just as blind men guided by another blind man, they miss the right path and they fall into the ditch, and they get, along with materially attached men, they're led by another materially attached man, they are bound by the ropes of fruitive labor which are very strong cords, and so they have to continue coming back to the material miseries again and again. So this is a verse which actually Srimad Bhagavatam, in Srimad Bhagavatam, where Prahlad Maharaj, he is, telling his father. His father is a very, very much materialistic person. So he is trying to tell his father that, when his father asks him, where are you getting all this, this kind of knowledge, which is spiritual knowledge, where are you getting it? So he is saying that, my dear father, these people, the materialistic people, these men who are just like you, they don't know what is actually their real self-interest. Everyone is busy trying to fulfill their self-interest and actually don't know that the true self-interest, nate vidu, they don't know that the true self-interest is to go back to Godhead. They are just illusioned by the external energy. So we also have in the verse 7.19, which says that self-interest lies in, real self-interest lies in understanding your relationship with the Supreme Lord, which is confirmed in 7.19. Bahunam janmanavanti gnanavan mam prapadyate. After many births, we actually come to understand that what is our true interest. Our true interest is in attaching ourselves to, is doing service in Krishna consciousness and doing yajna with its true purport. So that is so some yogis, like we were saying, they prefer to worship demigods by offering different sacrifices to them, and they are not really aware that's one kind of sacrifice, but that is not, that will lead them to Krishna consciousness. So it is transcendental all the same, but it is not yet in that perfection. It's still in the level where they need to strive for perfection a little after some more time. The sacrifice, like we have been understanding, it is ultimately satisfies Vishnu, and that is what yajna means. So even though the person is doing it with the motive for himself, he wants something for himself, ultimately Krishna says that every yajna is yeah, Ravi Prabhu has asked to put your attendance. Actually, there is also yesterday's attendance. Some of you who were there yesterday, I request you to kindly put your attendance for yesterday also. I think Kirti Mataji has sent a link. Shall I just post yesterday's attendance? Those of you who were there yesterday, I'll just share that link for a minute. She had asked me to post it. So this is a link which she has sent. So those of you who have, I'm just posting it in the chat. Please also put your attendance for yesterday. So this is attendance for yesterday. Please mark it in on both of these, and Kirti Mataji will make note of the attendance for yesterday. Right. So sacrifices are placed in two main divisions. One is the sacrifice for worldly possessions, like how we just discussed, and the sacrifice in pursuit of transcendental knowledge. If you're in Krishna consciousness, then the sacrifice you're doing, where all your material possessions are only for Krishna. Whatever you're doing, you're doing it only, you're aware that it is only for Krishna. So those who want temporary material benefits, however, they sacrifice their material possessions only to satisfy demigods. They are not aware of the concept of Krishna, Krishna and demigods and what are their relative positions. They are not yet aware. They're not being told about how the scriptures have clearly discussed this. And the reason why they don't know, Krishna is a person who gives forgetfulness and memory. So there is a reason why there are some people who are not yet aware, because Krishna knows that they still have desires. They want to. They are the reason why they are come here to the material world is not yet done. They're still after the different businesses related to searching after temporary happiness without Krishna. So impersonalists, they're sacrificing their identity. So even the impersonalists are doing a sacrifice. They actually want to blend with the supreme effulgence. So what are they sacrificing? They are also sacrificing something. They are sacrificing their identity because they want to merge into the existence of the impersonal Brahman or the transcendence. So they are also doing some sacrifice. The demigods are powerful living entities that maintain and supply the entire supply, whatever heating, water, lighting, all the facilities are being given to us by the different demigods. And those who are interested in material benefits, they are worshipping demigods by various sacrifices according to rituals. They are called the Bahva Ishwaravadi. That is, they are believers of many. Bahu Ishwaravadi. They believe in many gods. And whereas those who worship the impersonal feature, they regard all the forms of demigods as temporary, and they sacrifice their time in philosophical speculation to understand the transcendental nature of the Supreme. For them, the altar of sacrifice is a Supreme Brahman, and the offering is self being consumed by the fire of Brahman. So these require a lot of, when you keep meditating upon the different types of sacrifices that people do, it's very vast, and there's a lot to ponder about, lot to meditate about it. So as we can see, there are basically two divisions. Whatever sacrifices are there in this world, everybody is doing some sort of, everybody is ultimately doing, work for Krishna. Ultimately everything comes to Krishna only. And there are two divisions. Some of them are doing it for the sake of getting worldly possessions, and some are doing the sacrifices for knowledge. The aim of the sacrifice is one, but varieties differ superficially. For example, there are different categories of sacrifices which are performed by different types of performers, and it's a superficial demarcation of the varieties. And this factual aim of all sacrifices, so Krishna says that Bhoktaram Yajna Tapasa. So he says that I am the supreme enjoyer of every sacrifice. So factually, the aim of any sacrifice is to satisfy the Supreme Lord. It's only that one is doing it in consciousness, one is doing it for his own personal sense gratification. And Vishnu is also therefore known as Yajna himself, because every sacrifice is actually Vishnu himself. And what are the different comparisons of the different sacrifices that we have been discussing so far? Among the demigods, those people who are worshipping the demigods, they are sacrificing their material possessions for material enjoyment. They worship the demigods to get various types of material benefits. Some of them would want a beautiful wife, some want a son, a good son, or whatever. They have different, or they want a lot of wealth, they want their business, they're starting a business, they perform one yagya. Those are all different. They're trying to satisfy the different demigods for some material return. And what are they giving? What is their sacrifice in the process? They are sacrificing their material things. So they are usually the Bahu Ishwaravadis. In fact, Srila Prabhupada says that they are almost equivalent to atheists, because they're not really believing in that one God who knows everything and who's going to do everything for you when he's there. That concept is not there. They're still looking after material possessions. They're still going around and round in the cycle of birth and death. What about the impersonalists? What sacrifices are they doing? They are sacrificing their own self into the fire of the altar Supreme Brahman. How are they sacrificing their own self? That's because they don't want their identity anymore. No longer are they wanting to be separate entity. They don't want to be identified as separate. So they are sacrificing their identity. They're happy to be not known as and not existent at all, to just merge. So they're sacrificing something. They're regarding the different demigods as temporary, and they sacrifice their designations. They end their individual existence and they merge into the Brahman. And so they sacrifice their time also, because they spend a lot of time doing meditation, philosophical speculations. They may be doing different kinds of yogas, Ashtanga yoga. So they will do different sorts of things to merge with the Supreme. But which is a perfect yogi or the first class mystic yogi? So Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita actually very clearly he explains how only when when you're in Krishna consciousness is your yagya perfect. You become a perfect yogi. Why is that so? Because you're not only are you aware that nothing belongs to you, so you're sacrificing everything for Krishna. It's not like you're giving something, hey God, here, take this much of money I'm spending for you. You better give me this much or give me that. But there is no, they believe everything I'm giving to Krishna. I'm using my laptop for Krishna. I'm using my voice for Krishna. I'm using this room for Krishna. I'm using this house for Krishna. Nothing belongs to me. Everything belongs to him and I'm using it for him. And so they give their own self already. They're giving their material possessions. They're also giving their own self. They want no name. They want no fame. They are not after, they don't care for whether, na dhanam na janam, na dhanam na janam na sundarim kavitam va jagadisha kamaye mama janmani janmanishwari bhavatat bhakti rahaituki tvai. Na dhanam, they don't want any money, they give it everything to Krishna. Na janam, they don't want any fame, they don't want people to know them. They have also sacrificed their identity. Na dhanam, na janam, na sundari. They don't want any beautiful spouse or anything. They are just wanting to have Janmani, Janmani, as many birds as possible. They want to be in service of Krishna. They just want to serve. So they have given off their material possession. They have given off their own identification also, and they are also don't have any attachment for liberation also. They don't even want liberation. They're ready to go birth after birth in service of the Lord. So that is like complete sacrifice, complete consummation. Arjuna, he sacrifices everything for Krishna. So he is a first class yogi, and without losing his existence, he is able to sacrifice his everything without losing his existence. Okay, he is just giving everything for the satisfaction of Krishna, and he's ready to give up everything basically. So let's look at this material loop. So a person who is ignorant is a person who leads a sinful life. And when he is leading a sinful life, he cannot have a spiritual existence. He has to be in the material world. He's trapped in the material world again and again. So there is an important word called tapa over here. Tapa is a word which we all need to always remember. So when Brahma was first time created, he didn't know who he is, what is his purpose, and he was so lost. And then he heard these two words, tapa, and he understood that that his basic what he needs to do is he needs to do tapa or perform penance, by which what he's supposed to do will he will be enlightened to do that. And that is what actually happened. He performed tapa penance for thousands and thousands of years, and then Krishna reveals the Vedas and how to create the world, and he gets all that knowledge. All sacrifices must be performed with the knowledge of their purpose and the goal. So you should know that what is the reason why you're doing it's for Krishna consciousness. You're doing it for Krishna, and you should be doing it all the time. Tapa should be an integral part of us. So giving up, having some control, all these should be a part. Some the adulterate. So look at 4.26 and 4.26. Krishna is saying in 4.26, Shrotra dinindriyanyanye samyamagnishu juhvati shabdadin vishayananya indriyagnishu juhvati. So the unadulterated brahmacharis, they are sacrificing the hearing process and also their senses in the fire of mental control. I think this verse I had already just described. Whereas the grahasthas, they are sacrificing their objects of senses in the fire of the senses. Only the grahasthas are able to do sacrifice of objects which they would otherwise enjoy for their own senses. So this one I think I was describing in the beginning about the four kinds of divisions. We are meant to become perfect yogis ultimately, and human life is not for sense gratification like animals. This realization has to come when we are reaching towards the end of this cycle of birth and death in this world. The students are like I just mentioned, they are under the care of a master, and they have to only hear the words concerning Krishna. They're always engaging fully in Hare Namanu Kirtanam, chanting the glories, and they have to restrain themselves from vibrations of different material sounds. They have to only engage in hearing transcendental sounds. The Grahasthas have license to perform some things for sense gratification, but then their life is in a sense. So, marriage is on the principles of religious life is actually giving them the limited restraint. With restraint they will be able, restricted sex life they will be able to enjoy. So this is also a kind of yajna, because they are also restricting themselves. When they become a householder, they are restricting they're sacrificing their general tendency towards trying for higher or greater sense gratification. So when you marry also, it is a kind of a yajna, because you are restricting your sex life. So in 4.27, we can see um, सर्वाणीन्द्रिय कर्माणि प्राणकर्माणि चापरे आत्मसंयम योगाग्नौ जुह्वति ज्ञानदीपिते. Others who are interested in achieving self-realization through control of mind and senses, what do? They offer the functions of all their senses and of the life breath as oblations into the fire of the controlled mind. So this is also a sacrifice. They are performing the sacrifice in the form of control of their mind and senses, and they are offering it to the controlled mind. So 4.27 and 4.28 as well are going to be saying similar. In the Yoga Sutra of Patanjali, the soul is called Pratyagatma and Paragatma. As long as the so as long Okay. As long as the soul is attached to sense enjoyment, it is called Paragatma. And when the soul gets detached from sense enjoyment, it's called Pratyagatma. So the Patanjali system of yoga is instructing a person how to control the functions of the body's air, so that ultimately it is favorable for purifying the soul of all material attachments. So it's a slow process, but that is again the ultimate aim. And according to this Patanjali system of yoga, Pratyagatma is the ultimate goal. So again, as you can see, it is a detachment from sense enjoyment, which is the ultimate goal. But this Pratyagatma is withdrawn from activities in matter. That is just an explanation of how you are sacrificing the functions of your senses to a controlled mind. The senses are interacting with the sense objects. For example, the ear is there for hearing, eyes are seeing, nose are meant for smelling, tongue for tasting, hand for touching, and all of them are engaged in activities outside the self. They are called functions of pranavayu. Enlightenment is when you start engaging in the knowledge, in searching for self-realization rather than in your gratification. And in 4.28, Krishna is saying, द्रव्य यज्ञास्तपो यज्ञ योग यज्ञास्तथा परे स्वाध्याय यज्ञान स्वाध्याय यज्ञान यज्ञाश्च यतयः संशितव्रताः. So once a person accepts, having accepted the strict vows, then some of them become enlightened by sacrificing their possessions, and others by performing austerities, severe austerities. They're practicing the yoga of the eightfold mysticism, which is Ashtanga Yoga, or by studying the Vedas to advance in transcendental knowledge. So in 4.27 and 4.20, for example, Dravya Yajna, as we saw, it's about giving something in charity. The Jnanamaya Yajna is those who are engaged in, the study of the Vedas, and those who are controlling the senses, that is called the Yogamaya Yajna. There are different kinds of yajnas, which are different types, which are meant for different types of yogis. So which we'll be studying more of it in detail in chapter 6, as I have been saying quite often. We will see that yogi namapi sarvesham madgatenantaratmana shraddhavan bhajate yoma same yuktatamo mataha. So again in chapter 6 also, Krishna, in the verse 47 towards the end, he clearly declares that of all the different types of yogis that we have been continuously discussing today, he who constantly abides in Krishna with great faith and he worships Krishna in transcendental loving service is most intimately united with in yoga, and it is the highest of all. So I'm just reading the translation of 6.47, where we can see that so many different types of yogis are there, but the highest is one who is constantly in Krishna consciousness. Some persons are sacrificing their possessions. Example, the Dharma Shala into Anna Kshetra the Atithi Shala, all these Vidya Pitha, they give money there, hospitals, old age homes, they give food there, they provide education for the poor, charitable activities is Dravya Maya, higher, going, trying to go to higher planets, austerities are called, there are Chandrayana, Chaturmasya, these are different ways of doing things, sacrifices to go to the higher planets, including severe vows for conducting life under some rigid rules. Chaturmasya is also a vow which a candidate does. For 4 months, they don't shave during the year, from July to October. He also will not eat certain foods. He does not eat twice in a day, and he will not leave his home for those days. So, such sacrifice of comforts is called a Tapomaya Yajna. So, these are all the different kinds of yajnas. It's very interesting how different people, based on their natures, they will take up to the different kinds of yajnas. We also have the Hatha Yoga, Ashtanga Yoga. Even pilgrimage is a kind of a yajna where you're giving out your time and your energy, your money. Some engage themselves in study of different literatures, Swadhyaya Yajna, and all the yogis are faithfully engaged in different types of sacrifices. Krishna consciousness, however, is the highest, is a direct service of the Supreme Lord. Krishna consciousness you cannot attain by any of the above mentioned types of sacrifice. It can only be attained by the mercy of the Lord. Simply by sitting and doing lots of different kinds of yajnas, you cannot attain Krishna unless you have the grace of Krishna. You will be able to understand Krishna only when you get the grace. How will you get the grace? By constantly doing devotional service. Krishna loves his devotees, and then he becomes a devotee of his devotee. So that is a high, that is a high regard Krishna has for his devotees. 4.29 says, अपाने जुह्वति प्राणं प्राणे प्राणे पानं तथा परे प्राणापानगतिरुद्ध्वा प्राणायामपरायणाः अपरे नियताहाराः प्राणान् प्राणेषु जुह्वति. So 4.29, it is stated that there are so in this, what we can see is there are different kinds of air passing within the bodies. Prana, apana, all these things are there within the body, and the yoga system is about controlling. It's another kind of sacrifice. So it's also about controlling the breath. So those who are inclined to the process of breath restraint to remain in trance, they practice by offering the outgoing breath into incoming breath into outgoing, and thus they remain in a kind of a trance, and ultimately they're able to stop all breathing. And others, they even can curtail the eating process by offering the outgoing breath into itself as sacrifice. So all these are, like we saw in the previous verse, they're just step towards Krishna consciousness, but a person who takes the bhakti, they need not go through all these different kinds of steps. So this system of yoga for controlling the breathing process is pranayama, and the processes are recommended for controlling the senses and for advancement in spiritual knowledge. So 4.30 says, Sarve pyete yajna vidu yajna kshapita kalmashaha yajna shishtamrita bhujo yanti brahma sanatanam. So all these performers who know the meaning of sacrifice, they become cleansed of sinful reactions. So whether you are aware of the ultimate goal or not, whenever you perform any of these sacrifices, you get cleansed of sinful reactions. That's why it's such a must to do sacrifices anyway. And having tasted the nectar or the results of sacrifices, they gradually advance towards the supreme eternal atmosphere. So from the foregoing explanation, what do we see about the different kinds of sacrifice, namely sacrifice of one possession, sacrifice by studying of the Vedas, or performance of yoga? It is found that the common aim, as you can see, there's some kind of a common connection. It is that you have to control your senses. So sense gratification actually is the root cause of our material existence. The longing to enjoy separate from God independently is a result of us being automatically trapped in this material body. Therefore, unless and until you're situated in a platform apart from sense gratification, there's no chance of getting elevated into a platform of knowledge, bliss, and life, full life. So that is the reason why sense gratification becomes one of the main factors for spiritual growth. However, it's a very big misconception that when you're in bhakti, you are actually going through a lot of suffering. You're controlling your senses. You're not eating what you like. You're not, you're controlling all your senses. That's actually not true, because when you are in the blissful condition of love for Krishna, when you have the higher taste of love for Krishna and prema bhakti, when you're in prema bhakti, all these material, enjoyments which you thought were really, great pleasure, very pleasureful, you realize it's all temporary, and it is nothing close to the complete bliss, knowledge, and the full life when you reach that Sachidanand platform. When you reach there, everything will seem like very, very minuscule. You will understand that they are nothing. In fact, you will start, not hating. You have a despise, or you don't want it. You're not even interested. So this platform is in the eternal atmosphere, atmosphere. All the different sacrifices help us to get cleansed of sinful reactions and get ready for going to spiritual world. And by this advancement, not only does one be happy, you also become opulent in this life, but also at the end you will enter into the eternal kingdom of, instead of in the initial stage merging into Supreme Brahman, or in the later stages you will reach the spiritual world. So 4.32. So 4.32 is explaining how all the different 4.32 is explaining how the different kinds of sacrifices are approved by the Vedas, and all of them are born of different types of work. And when you know that, once you start understanding the purpose of these, you will ultimately become liberated. So in 4.30, 31, and 32, what are the things that we have seen? Let's just quickly go through. All performers who know the meaning of sacrifice, they become automatically cleansed of the sinful reactions, and they have tasted the nectar or the results of sacrifice, and they advance towards the supreme atmosphere. In 31, Krishna is saying, "O best of Kurus, without sacrifice, you can't live happily on this planet or the next." And so this is kind of a warning. If you're not understanding, if you don't, in the human birth, you can't understand sacrifice, and then it's not possible for you to be happy in this planet, or next in this planet to come. All the different types of sacrifice are approved by the Vedas, and all of them are born of different types of work. Knowing that itself gives you liberation. So then Krishna goes on to say, "Oh, chastise of the sacrifice performed in knowledge is better than mere
And there is a lot of disturbance coming. Somebody is, Sujata Gupta, I think, is unmuted, so there's a lot of noise.
Oh, okay. I didn't notice that. Okay. I was not getting the disturbance.
Yeah, it's
Thank you for letting me know. Yeah. I think now it would be better. Thanks a lot. So here we are looking at the verse 4.33. In 4.33, Krishna is saying, "Shreyan dravyamaya jnana yajna parantapa sarvam karma kilam partha jnane parisamapyate." Here Krishna is saying, "O chastiser of the enemy." He says that the sacrifice performed in knowledge is better than mere sacrifice of material possessions. After all, son of Pritha, all sacrifices of work culminate in transcendental knowledge. So whenever you're doing any work in the mode of sacrifice, it does reach in transcendental knowledge. And when you're doing that sacrifice in knowledge with the real understanding of what it is of yagya, then it is better than simply sacrificing your material possessions. So real knowledge culminates in Krishna consciousness. That is the highest stage of transcendental knowledge. Without elevation of knowledges, sacrifices are just material act. It's just like any other material activity. When a person gets elevated to the level of transcendental knowledge, then the activity that you do, everything is no longer material. Then the activity that you do also becomes transcendental. So this is what we have seen, that this is what we just saw. And so the conclusion of this section is that how do you achieve transcendental knowledge? The fruits of transcendental knowledge, who can successfully achieve it, the symptoms of one who has successfully applied it, and transcendental knowledge, how will you apply your knowledge to the work that you're doing. So this is the conclusion that we'll be seeing from verse 4.34 onwards. So 4.34 is saying, it's a very key verse, 4.34. It says, "Tadvidhi pranipatena pariprashnena sevaya upadekshanti te jnaninas. So this is telling us how is it possible for someone to get the transcendental knowledge. Once more, I'm reminding all of you, yesterday you all had, some of you have not posted your attendance. So yesterday's attendance is here, and also today's attendance is there. Please post both the attendances so that it is noted by the admin. So how transcendental knowledge, okay, we understood the value of it. Now how is it possible to get it? Krishna is declaring over here that the only way you can get it is through submissive approaching of it to a spiritual teacher. So this is very difficult in today's world. The moment we talk about approaching a spiritual teacher, we have in our mind all these false images of all these images of these mithyachar, the people who are just not really achieved spiritual realization themselves. So in this picture, we can see how Krishna himself, he is learning from Sandipani Muni. So he is himself showing by example that although Krishna knows everything, still by example he's showing that to get knowledge you have to approach a spiritual master. And how will you approach? You don't approach in a mode of where you're going to question everything, or in a rude sort of way. You have to inquire. It's not like you will accept everything blindly at all. Question answer is a basic way of understanding spiritual knowledge from ancient times. That's why whether it is a Bhagavad Gita, whether it is a Bhagavatam, you'll find that it's constantly inquiring. There's one person asking, then explaining, then again asking, again. So that for the circle of inquiry is very important. So you have to inquire from the spiritual master. And what should the mood be? It should be in a submissive mood, because you will know that he is in the parampara and he is saying things which are coming from the parampara. And what is parampara is a direct connection with Krishna. Parampara means it is ultimately connected to Krishna. And then you have to render service unto the spiritual master. How do you render service? Simply by following the guidances that he gives you. So for example, Prabhupada, he says that his spiritual master had given him just one instruction: I want you to spread Krishna consciousness in the Western world. That was his main instruction. And at those days, it was like an impossible thing. How can anybody go to the Western world, which is totally so materialistic? How can you talk about Krishna there? How can you spread Krishna consciousness? But then Prabhupada himself says many times, I got the power to, the courage to go to the Western world with hardly any money, just in a cargo ship, only because of chanting. And what is that? Yeah, this constantly remembering Krishna. And he got the courage to do it only because he wanted to serve his master. His master had simply told him, go to the Western world, publish books. He wanted him to write the translations in English and publish the books, get people to buy the books, get them to read it, go and talk about Krishna consciousness, talk about chanting. And that's all he did. With nothing he began, and within a span of just a few years, he transformed so many souls. He got them to become self-realized. So that's the amazing power of when you are able to really just accept whatever he says, the guidance. You can just take it that those are words coming from Krishna. And that is difficult because there are many people who are not really the realized souls. You have to find the true spiritual master. Again, who is the person who will help you come to a true spiritual master? Only Krishna. So when it is time, only Krishna is will be the person who will lead you. And when you are really there, you're ready to accept. When you're ready to accept the knowledge will come to you. So when you reach that stage of you're ready to acceptance, that stage has come. The guru will come to you. The self-realized souls will impart knowledge unto you. Why? Because they have seen the truth. Only one who has seen the truth can reveal the truth to you. So that was 4.34. And then in 4.35, Krishna says, he says, Yajñatva na punarmoham evam yasyasi pandava yena bhutanya sheshena drakshasyatmanyatho mayi. So he says that having obtained real knowledge from a self-realized soul, once you attain it, you will never fall into such illusion. For by this knowledge, you will see that all living beings are but part and parcel of the Supreme, or in other words, that they are mine, that they are Krishna's. So once you have approached the self-realized soul, you understand that all living beings are part and parcel of Krishna. You'll be able to see whether it's a gold or a piece of coal, everything is one. At the same time, if you have a goal, you'll be able to use it in the service of Krishna. So those are the great transformations that you will experience. Even if you're considered to be the most sinful of sinners, even somebody who is even right now doing a lot of sin, but if he's situated in the boat of transcendental knowledge, he will be be able to cross over ocean of misery. So these verses are talking about the power of the transcendental knowledge, of just being there, of just knowing itself is very, very powerful. So even if somebody is sinning, Krishna says that api chedasi papebhya sarvebhya papa kritamaha sarva jnanapla ve naiva vrijinam santarishyasi. You'll be able to cross the ocean of miseries just as a blazing fire. So this is also a very beautiful verse. It talks about it reminds me of again the Shishtastakam, talks about the blazing fire. It will turn firewood to ashes. Similarly, the fire of knowledge will burn all the reactions to the material activities. That is a power, and in this Kali Yuga, the only thing we need to do is chant. So however much we feel that you can't relate chanting and transcendental knowledge, we have to take it that this is coming from scriptures. This chant, this maha mantra is not material, it is transcendental. And when you keep chanting and you connect yourself to Krishna, you will be able to see that as your reactions to different material activities will burn. Initially it will be very disturbing. You will find that different kinds of thoughts will keep coming and disturbing you, but you will stick on. Determination is an important part of being in devotion. So in this world, there is nothing so sublime and pure as transcendental knowledge, and such knowledge is the mature fruit of all mysticism. One who is accomplished in practice of devotional service, he will enjoy this knowledge within himself and in due course of within himself in due course of time. So it will take. So for some people, once somebody asked Prabhupada, how long will it take me? Will it take me many, many births to become self-realized? So Prabhupada says, no, it depends on the intensity of your desire. So there is, the desire for materialistic things is considered to be bondage. But when you have a desire for spiritual understanding of for self-realization, that is called the true. It's a purified transcendental desire. So no longer is it binding. And if that is really strong, you can get that realization like in a second. You don't even need to go through any more births in this very body, in this very life. You can get it. So what are the rewards? What will you get when you're getting transcendental knowledge? So as I had explained in yesterday's class, the Sambandha Abhideya, the basically knowing of the formula and then knowing, trying to experiment it and finding out whether it works, and then you get the application where you get the final result of knowing this knowledge. What is the reward of knowing this and experiencing it? You will obtain knowledge and realization that all living entities are a part and part of Brahman, which will bring a huge transformation in your life. If a person is actually able to see this, then there's no longer, first of all, dualities will disappear. You will find that even if you feel a kind of liking for someone or dislike for someone, you will immediately able to see this is a duality. I'm getting trapped in a duality. And then you will quickly realize all living entities are part and parcel of Krishna. And when you have such a vision, there'll be never a fall into illusion. Again, Maya will not be able to capture you. And another, of course, the biggest benefit is that it will help you cross over the ocean of miseries, because you will be in a state of Sachidanand when you are in Krishna consciousness. In fact, even if somebody is at that point of time doing some sin, even then his sins get washed off and he is able to reach this position of a self-realized soul. By knowledge of self, super soul, and the relationship, if you simply know that you are the Jiva, what is your relationship with the Paramatma, and what is this material world, what is her purpose, and these basic things which Gita keeps on explaining in so many different ways, you understand that is knowledge. We will be seeing it also in subsequent chapters, that this is basically it. This is the knowledge. Once you know this, it is going to help you burn all your sinful reactions. And you will achieve self-realization, which is the mature fruit of all mysticism. Instead of doing all the different yoga, sitting and meditating on a light, or sitting and doing different sorts of pranayam, pratyahara, and all the self-control and all the different kinds of sacrifices, which in the end of this chapter 4, there's a whole detail which we have been studying today. The mature fruit of all of it, you will get that self-realization. You will simply get the devotional service. That is the ultimate aim. You will just get that straight away. It's like an elevator. So in 4.39, Krishna is saying, Shraddhavan labhate jnanan tatparah samyatendriyah Jnanam labdhva param shantim achirenadhigacchati. A person who is faithful, who is dedicated to transcendental knowledge and who subdues his senses is eligible to achieve such knowledge. And having achieved it, he quickly attains a supreme spiritual peace. I was actually explaining a little earlier that subduing of the senses is not something very miserable. You actually taste higher pleasure. You actually use your senses in the service of Krishna and Krishna consciousness. So then you are, the joy is multiple times than the joy that you're trying to gain through your material senses. So, but ignorant and faithless persons, they always have a constant doubt. Maybe the scriptures are just written by some human being. Like, how do you know it is by God? How do you know that it is from Krishna? So there's constant doubt. This is very, very common. Even if we suppose, like we stop devotee association, even I have experienced it number of times. Suppose I stop a devotee association by not attending these online classes, or I'm not able to go to the temple, or I'm not able to constantly keep in touch with devotional, with devotees. There is a sure fall. You can surely suddenly some kind of doubt will, are these scriptures really worth following? Is it really worth all the effort? Because Krishna is not cheap. And then Maya will keep immediately entrapping you. Okay, so this person is easily, he's going to be falling, he's not yet there, he's not ready for it. So Maya is waiting just to test you every moment. So if at any point of time the doubt keeps coming, then you cannot attain Krishna consciousness. You can't, because you will, it's a fall. It's just automatically when you start being faithless, and then there's a fall. Because and for such a doubting soul, once it is a sad reality that when the doubting comes in, then there is again, the happiness is no longer there. That blissful happiness which comes from Krishna consciousness is not there. Then any other happiness which you're experiencing is material, and it is temporary, and you will see that it's not lasting, it won't stay. But as long as we are in this material body and we actually come to the highest state of Krishna consciousness, there is a chance of fall. We are fallible. So we need to constantly do the ABCDs of bhakti. We need to have association. We need to be reading books. We need to chant regularly, and we need to, look at our diet by accepting only prasada. So these basic things, if we try to keep on following and reminding ourselves, follow the four regulative principles, and then we are able to be ready to stay in that transcendental blissful state. No sinful reactions can affect one who performs all his duties with transcendental knowledge, is what we come to know in 4.41. And you can slash, like what we had said earlier in yesterday's class. I was giving you a brief summary of everything. Ultimately, you will be able, like a sword will cut off things. This you can slash with the knowledge, with the sword of knowledge. You can slash the doubts which are born out of your ignorance. So 4.41 and 42 are ultimately saying, come on, stand up and fight, O Arjuna, because you have to slash your knowledge, you have to slash your doubt, the sword of knowledge. Who is a person who can achieve? Like we have seen, one has to have faith and is free from doubts. For a person who is in doubt, one more reminder, he cannot be happy. Only when you have faith, the happiness will start coming, and then you have to be in devotional service. One who acts in devotional service, renouncing the fruits of his actions, and whose doubts have been destroyed by transcendental knowledge, he is situated in the self, and he is not bound by reactions of birth. So this is the last two verses. Yoga sanyasta karmanam jnana sanchitana jnana satchinna samshayam Atmavantanna karmani nibadnanti dhananjaya. And in 4.42, which is the last verse of this chapter, Krishna says, Tasmad ajnana sambhutam hridstham jnana sinatmanaha chitvenam samshayang yogam atishtotishtha bharata. So atishtotishtha, that's it. He says, stand up and fight. So therefore, the doubts which have arisen in your heart out of ignorance should be slashed with the weapon of knowledge. So today we are ending in exactly 8 o'clock. So we have gone through Evam Parampara in great detail. Understanding of knowing Krishna as God is important to understand Gita. We have also gone through how Krishna is a goal of all the parts and creator of Varnashrama system. It's also tough thing to understand. Then we look through all these concepts of karma and how so many sacrifices are there. We try to go through all the sacrifices. These verses related to sacrifices are, I have always felt that, I've never really, it's never enough. I just feel like every time going back to it and trying to understand, how you are sacrificing material possessions in fruitive, when you're doing fruitive work, when you're doing different kinds of yagyas and pujas for demigod worship, how in the next higher stage you are sacrificing your identity. You want to just merge. That is the next higher level. And then in the highest level, you don't even want liberation for yourself. You have sacrificed your identity, you have sacrificed your material. You're not even sacrificing. You're like, everything is yours, Krishna. That is, complete consummation of the self. So that is the highest stage. And then we understood how ultimately wherever you are, doesn't matter. Whichever sacrifice you're doing, everything is a sacrifice. Whatever you do ultimately is for Krishna. Then it's going to lead to the transcendental knowledge ultimately. But the best part is to choose bhakti. When you get this bhakti, when Krishna will be, will grace you with it. And then we went through from 4.34 to 42, we quickly went through the summary of the transcendental knowledge. So with that, we come to the end of today's class. Vancha kalpataru bhyascha kripa sindhubhya evacha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namah. Hare Krishna. Please join me next week for chapter 5. It's also a very beautiful chapter, which we are going to again talk about karma sannyasa yoga. So chapter 3 was karma and chapter 5 is karma sannyasa yoga. And we'll be looking at karma in a little more closely. I hope the class was useful for everyone to understand chapter 4 transcendental knowledge better. If there's any reflection or any sharing, please let me know if there's any question or any discussion you want to engage. Anybody has any questions or would like to share some reflections? Okay, please join me next week, Thursday, for chapter 5. I thought, let me not rush and race. Let me go at the pace in which I'm going. Explained very well. Thank you, Jalpa Mataji. Thank you so much. I will be doing my best to do justice for all the time of all of you elevated devotees, and I want to be of service to you, as well as, this is helping me also to brush through every chapter. There is never a time I feel that, okay, I know the Gita. Is like, I don't think anybody will reach that stage. We are constantly learning. Thank you so much, Vijay Kumar Prabhuji. Hare Krishna. I'm ending the class today.
Thank you, Mataji. Hare Krishna.
Hare
Hare
Krishna.
Krishna. Hare Krishna, Mataji.
Hare Krishna.